So there's a new 70s horror Halloween classic that's now streaming on Shudder. It's called Late Night with the Devil. So Late Night with the Devil takes place in 1977. It's about late night talk show host Jack Delroy, whose career is going down the tubes as he's dealing with the loss of his wife and alcohol addiction, and he's making his show more and more exploitative, controversial, to try to keep the viewers. And in a desperate move to save his show from cancellation, on Halloween night, he decides to interview the devil live on camera. How's it going, my friends? Welcome again to the Cobweb channel. My name is Daniel, and I'm so excited today to tell you about my favorite horror movie of 2024 so far. This movie actually came out in theaters last month in March, but it didn't play anywhere near me. I don't live in a small town for sure, but for some reason, my area is terrible for getting theatrical, independent horror. I was so sad I couldn't see this in theaters, but I'm so happy that it just hit Shudder this past weekend. I watched it right away, and man, I enjoyed this movie so much, and I want to tell you why you should check it out. So let's talk about what I liked about this movie. First up, lead actor David Dastmalchian as our talk show host of the Night Owls talk show, Jack Delroy. Now, David Dastmalchian is definitely one of those that guy actors. He's been popping up in tons of movies over the past many years. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff with Christopher Nolan, like The Dark Knight and Oppenheimer. I recently saw him in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad and in last year's Last Voyage of the Demeter, that Dracula on a boat movie. He's always dependable. He's always good, but I've never seen him be a lead in a film, so it was so cool to see him get that chance.
As we attempt to commune with the devil.
And he's really good. I thought he was really convincing as a 70s talk show host. He's actually in competition with Jack Carson. I love that bit of realism there, and I love David Dastmalchian as this character, a very interesting character. And something that I found so fascinating about him is as he's going to do this show where he interviews a demon-possessed girl live on TV, is he's actually not a skeptic. I think that would be a less interesting motivation if he was just like, hey, it's Halloween night, let's give the folks a nice spooky show. We're gonna interview a demon-possessed girl, ooh, and it's just all in good fun. He doesn't really believe in it. That's not really the case. He actually becomes convinced of the realism of the supernatural stuff going on in this movie very early in the film, so he knows exactly what he's doing. And it's just that the reality of the devil and of demons is not his main concern. His main concern is his career, his show, saving his career, making sure his show doesn't get canceled. That's the main concern, and that really resonated with me because I think in reality, for a lot of us, if we got a confirmation of the existence of demons, ghosts, aliens, whatever, a Bigfoot, like whatever you want to say, I think a lot of us would say, okay, but is this going to affect my daily life? Is it going to affect my income, my job, my ability to own a home, my reliable transportation? Like, what's going to be the effect there? And I don't even say that to mean like, oh, we're all just money obsessed. That's all we care about. We don't care about these philosophical issues and such. No, it's just that, you know, daily life is hard. And like, that would be like our main worry at all times as adults, those of us who are adults at least. And that's the case for David Dastmalchian. He's like, okay, demons are real, but can this help my job? Like, can this save my career? If so, like, let's do this. I don't even care if that's irresponsible. Like, let's go. And I did love the reality of this movie that we are watching a 1970s talk show. And they really set this up at the beginning of, this is a lost episode of a 70s talk show that we found, and we're going to intercut it with behind the scenes footage that was also recovered. And you, the audience, are going to get to watch this horrific event that happened live on television in 1977. That kind of a found footage thing. And that really reminded me of Ghostwatch. Ghostwatch is a movie that came out in 1992 that posits it's a live BBC program on Halloween night where a news crew goes into a haunted house to try to figure out if it's haunted or not. If you want to call this found footage or mockumentary, whatever, this is my favorite found footage movie. The way a lot of people talk about Blair Witch, that's how I feel about Ghostwatch. And this movie reminded me a lot of that. And David Dastmalchian actually confirmed that in an interview I heard with him where he did compare this movie to Ghostwatch. But this isn't a ghost movie. This is a demon possession movie. I mentioned there was a possessed girl, and there is. She's played by young Australian actress Ingrid Torelli, and the character has such a fascinating backstory that she was born and raised in a home that housed a satanic cult, and she was not able to leave the house. So the first many years of her life was just living with a satanic cult. When she was finally gotten out of there by the authorities, she's now possessed by a demon. And this is a very unique take on possession, and one that I loved. And that's a big deal that I loved it, because I'm not always the biggest fan of demon possession movies. Honestly, The Exorcist, of course, did it incredibly in 1973, invented the genre. The Exorcist 3 was a really great sequel to that. But other than those, there's so little possession movies that work for me. It feels like, Halloween kicked off the slasher craze. It wasn't the first slasher movie. You got Black Christmas, you got Psycho before that. But Halloween really kicked it off. But there's a lot of slasher movies that are at least close to as good as Halloween, so it became a great genre. For demon possession, there just hasn't really been anything that's like The Exorcist that's matched The Exorcist. But I really like it if there's a unique take. Last year we actually got 2 unique takes on the genre. The Exorcist Believer. No, that was a joke. I'm just kidding. Actually talking about Talk to Me. Talk to Me is another Australian movie. Late Night with the Devil is an Australian film as well, although you wouldn't know it because it takes place in America. Talk to Me was an incredible version of possession where kids are using possession as like a party trick for their drinking games. When Evil Lurks was another great possession movie from last year, though I don't have that one on Blu-ray. Late Night with the Devil is another unique take where this girl is possessed by a demon, but the demon doesn't take control of her all the time. She lives with this demon all the time in her day-to-day life, but the demon doesn't always take control of the body. That is so creepy to me. In The Exorcist, Reagan was basically dead. I mean, she wasn't dead, and they saved her in the end, of course, spoilers. But it was like she was dead because the demon just had full control of her body, and Reagan was gone. And there was such a sense of urgency that we have to do an exorcism of this thing right now, or it's gonna be horrible. An exorcism is less urgent, so she's just walking around in her daily life, and she refers to this demon as Mr. Wriggles, because every now and then it will wriggle into her mind and wriggle out. That is so unsettling to me. I'm getting chills as I talk about it. And Ingrid Torelli was so good in this film. She was so creepy in such a unique way. I watched an interview with her as well, and she talked about how she didn't watch any horror movies, any scary movies to prepare for this role. Instead, she watched 70s late night talk shows and just interviews of people from that time period to just get a sense of the time rather than get a sense of how to play a creepy girl. She even said she wasn't trying to be creepy. She said she just tried to connect with the trauma of the character. It worked out so well because she was such a unique take on creepy, a character who was very cold, but felt like she was always acting, trying to act like she's okay when there's something brewing under the surface. When I watched her, I wasn't thinking of Linda Blair. I wasn't thinking of anyone else I've ever seen play any version of a demon-possessed girl, a creepy kid, anything like that. She felt like it was wholly her own take on the material. And that was so impressive to me. The movie is also really darn creepy. You are going to get some really unsettling, spooky imagery in this movie. You are going to get a bit of practical effects gore, which I actually wasn't expecting. I expected the movie to be a little bit more understated. It is most of the time, but it does let loose a couple of times. And a lot of really entertaining side characters populating all throughout. But what did I not like about this movie? Well, unfortunately, there's a pretty big one. The movie doesn't totally stick the landing, in my opinion. While I found the movie very creepy throughout, and it did have some practical effects gore sequences once or twice, they really try to end this movie with a bang, and I thought it got bigger than I wanted it to. And the special effects got bigger, got crazier, and I just wanted something that got under my skin rather than something that was a spectacle. That was a little bit disappointing to me. And at the ending, they have this whole thing tacked on at the end that does betray the central conceit of the movie, which is that you're watching a 1970s talk show. They do kind of, unlike Ghostwatch, which sticks to the bit the entire time, Late Night with the Devil does abandon it a bit at the end. And at the end, more than anything else, it actually reminded me of 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a movie I love, but not a movie that I thought I should be reminded of at the end of Late Night with the Devil. They also add on one more element to Jack Gilroy, our main host, backstory that did feel tacked on. It just felt like, oh, okay, I guess that's another thing now we know about this character. But the climax of the movie was not the time to share just like one more little fact of his backstory. I didn't need that tacked on. But the final shot of the movie is spectacular, so it did save it for me in the end. The only other criticism I have is while I did love David Dastmalchian's character almost through the entire movie, he's not funny. And I'm not saying I wanted this movie to be more of a horror comedy, have more like jokes throughout. That is not what I mean. I like the serious tone, but he's a late night talk show host. He's supposed to make jokes, and he does sometimes. They never really worked for me. And I think part of that is because they're really committing to the time period. I mean, one joke that he tells is about Jimmy Carter and Jimmy Carter's brother. And like, you know, I was born in the 90s, so that's not exactly my frame of reference for politics, so I didn't get that joke. But there was never a joke that really hit. He also talked in interviews about how this kind of character is not in his comfort zone because he usually plays weirdos. That's what you'll see him play in almost anything he's ever done. And being a, quippy talk show host, improv, hey, hit the band, that's not really his thing. And I commend him for trying to do something different. I'm glad he was cast. 90% of the time I loved him, but I kind of wish the two directors of the movie had just pushed him a little harder to get that comedy side of him, to get those laughs. But that's a very small criticism. Otherwise, huge fan of this movie. Check it out on Shudder. But let's go ahead and rate this movie. So for atmosphere, I'm going to give it an 8. I did love how committed like 90%, 85% of this movie was to a 1970s talk show. The movie also takes place on Halloween, which I mentioned earlier, but I didn't mention that there's a lot of great Halloween decorations throughout. You'll see some Halloween costumes of some of the people in the audience. And that means that this could be an October staple for me in the future. I can easily see myself rewatching this time and time again. So I did love the atmosphere, but it betrayed it a bit at the end, which did disappoint me. That's why I'm docking the score just a little bit. And for characters, I'm going to give this an 8 because I did really like Jack Delroy's character. I did really like the possessed girl. And there are just a lot of other entertaining characters like Jack Delroy's co-host, who's kind of the voice of reason, trying to steer them towards the right direction. Of course, they don't listen. A skeptic character. There is a character on the TV show whose role is basically to just try to give a rational explanation to anything supernatural that happens. And he was like great for being kind of hateable. His arguments aren't always wrong, but he's just such a jerk about everything the whole time. Very entertaining performance. Then you've got the possessed girl's doctor and guardian. She's really good. Just a lot of great characters all throughout this. Definitely going to give this an 8 in this category. For story, I'm going to give this a 7. Now, while it's not super original, it does take a good bit from Ghostwatch, like I mentioned. And of course, it's not going to be like one of the most fascinating stories you've ever seen, but it is a really good version of just demon possession, interviewing the devil on a talk show. That's a good central idea, a unique take on possession. Really enjoyed all that. And for scares, I'm also going to give this an 8. I found this movie very creepy. The creepy imagery totally worked for me. The practical gore I thought was really fun. If you want to watch a movie that's just creepy and is going to get under your skin most of the time, I do think this is a really good choice. And that means overall, I'm going to give this film an 8 out of 10. It is my favorite horror film of 2024 so far. I'm so excited to have another classic 70s horror film, even though it didn't technically come out in the 70s. So that's my review, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, but let me know down in the comments below, did you check this movie out, or are you convinced? Are you going to watch it? If you do watch it later, come on back to the comment section and let me know. Give a subscribe if you haven't yet, a like if you enjoy this. If you want to stick around the channel, check out this playlist right over here of a bunch of other scary movie reviews. With all that said, don't forget to enjoy yourself today, have some fun, and I'll see you next time.